Again, welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar about introduction. Well, it's about Section 7 of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act and a broader NEPA analysis. So today's webinar is the fourth of 6 webinars in our 2022 Wild and Scenic webinar series. And in today's webinar, we're going to review the evaluative standards that will apply to water resources projects and learn how to incorporate Section 7 into the process of a broader NEPA analysis or a permit process for a proposed project. But first, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Angie Furman, and I'm the River Training Center Coordinator for River Management Society, located here in Southern Oregon. And I'm going to be helping moderate today's session along with my colleague Risa Shimoda, who's helping out behind the scenes. For those who are new to RMS, we support individuals who study, protect, and manage North America's rivers through communication, outreach, training, and resources. We've got a bunch of different membership levels that allow you to stay connected and updated with what's going on in your field and other related areas of river management, as well as share opportunities, ask questions, find solutions, and network with other members. Some of the perks are we've got some really great chapter trips lined up this year. Our Southwest chapter, Pacific chapter, our Northwest chapter, our Northeast chapter. So lots of great things happening. And we also have our River Management Symposium coming up next year in early 2023. So stay tuned. We'll be having more information come out soon about that. Before we get started today, I just want to cover a few things. The way that you can interact with us today and ask questions or share comments with the presenters is in your question, under your question tab in your GoToWebinar control panel. And then also we are going to be taking breaks during the presentation as well at the end of the session today to answer any questions that you may have. Also, this is being recorded and will be emailed to you afterwards. And you can also find this on the RMS video channel. And just to show you how to get there, if you go to river-management.org, you go to the Training and Events tab, and then the third one down is the River Training channel. I will also put a link to that so that you all have easy access to that. I also want to let you know that today's material tracks with information found in Module 9 of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Courses Study. This is a free and self-directed learning resource that can be accessed on rivers.gov by going to the Resources tab and then clicking on WSR training modules. If you're unfamiliar, rivers.gov is an extremely useful website. I go to it all the time and has a lot of great information from the Interagency Wild and Scenic Rivers Coordinating Council. A lot of great resources. So highly encourage you to go check it out. I also want to take a few seconds to point out that we've got a couple handouts today that we might refer to, and you can access those under the Handouts tab on your control panel. Also, those handouts contain some of the contact information of our presenters today. So without further ado, I'd like to invite today's presenters, Dave and Jim, to introduce themselves. So Jim, we'll start with you.
Great, thank you, Angie. It's a pleasure to be here today with all of you. I'm Jim McCartney with the National Park Service. I'm a river manager on several partnership rivers in the Northeast. I'm based in Concord, New Hampshire, and I'm also a member of the Interagency Wild and Scenic Rivers Coordinating Council. And I'll turn it over to Dave.
Hi there, my name is David Cernicek. I am the river manager on the Snake River Headwaters designation. 13 different streams, 27 sections of river in the greater Snake River Headwaters in the Jackson Hole area of Western Wyoming for the Bridger-Teton National Forest. And getting started today. Let's get going.
All right.
Are you ready
well,
for
real
no,
quick.
you have to Okay.
I just want to run a quick poll here. So we've learned a little bit about the presenters. We just want to know a little bit about you and your familiarity with Section 7 of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. So if you can take a moment to let us know how familiar you are with Section 7, if you're new to it, if you know a ton, expert, other, you can put your reply in the questions box. We've got a lot to cover today, so I'm not going to keep this open too long. All right, let's see. Looks like we've got a good spread of new to this and people who need to tune up their knowledge and people who have a good amount. So glad you're all joining us. And now I'm going to pass it to you, Dave, to go ahead and take us through.
Okay.
Hold on, let me get you. There we go.
Let's see. Okay, last month we presented an introduction to Section 7 of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. During that webinar, we discussed the intent of the Section 7, how it's the heart of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act and provides the teeth with which the river administrating agencies can protect certain rivers from harmful effects of water resources projects. We also defined a water resources project and explained that Section 7 applies only to hydropower projects licensed by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and other water resources projects. We discussed the 4 different evaluative standards and where they apply and ended by discussing the river administering agency's responsibilities under Section 7. For the benefit of those who may not have attended last month's webinar, we'll start with a quick review of those key concepts. Today we'll talk through examples of water resources projects that have the potential to modify the river channel. Water resources projects are defined as any dam, water conduit, reservoir, powerhouse, transmission line, or other water or project works under the Federal Power Act, or other construction of developments which would affect the free-flowing characteristics of a wild and scenic river or study river. This includes Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC hydropower projects like gas pipelines or electrical transmission lines that, depending on their location, may or may not be water resources projects that have different standards. The Act defines free flowing as existing or flowing in a natural condition without impoundment, diversion, straightening, riprapping, or other modification of the waterway. Remember that free flowing, free flowing is free flowing is not defined as maintaining completely natural hydrological cycles in a river system or maintaining a special flow or of the stream. Free flowing means it's flowing without impoundment between the beginning of the designation and the end of it. You may recall from the introductory webinar that the standards used to evaluate a proposed project are driven by the type of water resources project, whether it's a hydro project, licensed by FERC, and the location of the project, whether it's upstream, downstream, or on a tributary of a designated or congressionally authorized study river. The 4 standards included in the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act are on or directly affecting, direct or adverse effect, invade the area or unreasonably diminish, or invade the area or diminish. To put that in kind of a table format, on the left within a Wild and Scenic River corridor, on the right outside the Wild and Scenic River corridor, meaning upstream, downstream, or on a tributary. A proposed hydropower project, a dam within a Wild and Scenic River, the standard would be on or directly affecting. Obviously, a dam in the middle of a designated river would be a no-go. That's what the Wild and Scenic River is written about, is not having dams in the middle of Wild and Scenic Rivers. Other proposed water resources project, standard is still direct and adverse. And what we've run that by, what we're evaluating is the free flow, the water quality, and the ORVs, outstanding remarkable values. Whether it's upstream, downstream, or up a tributary for a FERC project, the standard would be invade the area or unreasonably diminish. For other water resources project, it would be the same, invade the area or unreasonably diminish. But the standards are different. What we run that through, the funnel we run that through would be much different. That would not be free flow water quality in ORVs. It would be scenic, recreational, fish, and wildlife values. And if we were to do that with a congressional designated study river, that standard would change to invade the area or diminish, no unreasonably there. And it'd still be through scenic, recreational, fish, and wildlife values. Just to break up the monotony of being in a training today, we'll give you some 3 scenarios today on a fictitious river. And your task is to determine which Section 7 evaluation standards apply. Please refer to the Santa Frietta handouts that are on your speaker, on your little box there and under the handouts, or otherwise they're going to be up on the screen as I describe the general description of what the situation is. And you're going to be asked to figure out whether the standards on or directly offending, direct or adverse effect, invade the area or unreasonably diminish, or 4, invade the area or diminish. So what we got. In this fictional scenario, a portion of the river system was added to the National Wild and Scenic River System in early 1996. The outstandingly remarkable values, ORVs, of the designated portion of the river are scenery, because it's a unique landform, absolutely beautiful. The fishery, there's a unique spawning habitat for the Santa Frietta steelhead. Historic, there's poultry significant in historic roads and trails. And recreational resources, there's a variety of activities. And this great feeling of remoteness and otherwise developed setting. The river characteristics are this: the river runs southward, kind of looks southeastward to me, but the headwaters line the nearby faraway wilderness area. The river runs through a mixture of public and private land along a U.S. highway, Highway 21. The 2 designated portions lie between the lines at the upper and lower portions of the map, and the upstream portion of the designated river is classified as wild, and the lower segment is classified as recreational. So our first scenario is a proposal by the Elk County Commissioners and State Department of Transportation in cooperation with the Federal Highway Administration, which means there's a federal nexus there, that there's federal money involved here. These parties want to replace the historic Hyenas Run Bridge. It was constructed in 1891 on County Road 322. The bridge crosses the Santa Frietta River just downstream the confluence with El Otro River. The bridge provides only access to the town of Santa Joaquina. Reconstruction of the bridge is needed to address the deteriorating conditions and safety concerns. The bridge is falling apart. It's built for horses, not semis. The project will include realignment of the approach roadways. The new bridge would be located immediately upstream, about 72 feet above the existing bridge upstream. The new bridge would use 2 piers rather than the existing 3 piers that are below the ordinary high water mark currently. The old bridge will be removed at project completion. So your assignment is to tell me, is this project subject to Section 7 of the Act? If so, why? If yes, what standard would apply and why? So go to work on this one. Start thinking. Let's take a few minutes. You could say no, yes, on or directly affecting, yes, direct and adverse affecting, invade the area or unreasonably diminish, yes, invade the area, diminish, no, I don't know what I'm doing, I just tuned in today to have something to do for an hour. Okay, everybody locked in their answers? All right. Yes, this is a water resources project. Because the existing bridge abutments that need to be removed are below the high water mark. And of course, the new bridge abutments are below the ordinary high water mark. The correct Section 7 evaluation standard to apply is standard 2, direct and adverse effects to the free flow, water quality, and ORVs because it's within the designated corridor. Who got that right? Raise your hand. I can't see you. The next scenario is a proposal by
Hey,
a private
Dave.
landowner. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry to interrupt. Your poll looks like it took over your slideshow. So now we can't see. You might have to exit the poll. There we go. Now we
We're
see
back in
it.
track?
We are
Okay.
back on track.
Okay. That was scary. Okay. Forget that happened. We're blaming it on Jim. This project would be considered a water resources project because it is below the ordinary high water mark. The project would be subject to Section 7, even though it's on private land, because it's within a designated, is that where we were? Or did I jump ahead? Okay.
I think you might have jumped ahead. I think you were describing scenario B.
Okay. Okay, the next scenario is proposed by a private landowner who lives on US Highway 21 along the recreation designated portion of the river. The landowner wants to repair the damage to the stream bed classified as recent flooding. The flood of 2007 changed the course of the segment of the Santa Frietta River, and the landowner lost a significant amount of river frontage near the house. So he's losing his house, big deal. The proposal is to place large woody material and boulders as partial deflectors of flow, slowing erosion of the stream banks. Placement of these materials will also allow accretion of sediment, and it will also encourage reestablishment of riparian vegetation behind and among the large wood, further protecting the stream banks. The landowner will need an Army Corps of Engineers Section 404 permit to place the materials in the river. Okay. Now, if you pass the last one, this one's going to be a little bit harder. Is this a water resources project subject to Section 7? If so, why? And what Section 7 evaluative standard applies and why? And how am I not going to screw this one up? Here we go. Lock in those answers. And ready to move along? Everyone got it figured out?
Let's give
Here we
it
go.
about 4 more seconds here.
Okay.
All right. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, this project would be considered a water resources project because it is below the ordinary high water mark. The project would be subject to a Section 7, even though it's on private land, because it's within the designated river corridor. We have to say over everything up to that ordinary high water mark. The project requires an Army Corps of Engineers permit, so that's the federal nexus that makes this a water resources project and gives us a say. The correct standard is to apply is the direct and adverse effect, because the project is within the designated river corridor. You sharing the poll results?
Yeah, looks like about 33% of people got it.
Okay, I'm not teaching very well today. Okay, but yeah, we have say when it's on private land or on our own land. We should be more critical when it happens on our own federal lands, on our own projects, than when it happens on somebody else's, because everybody's looking over our shoulder for us to be doing it right. If we're not doing it right, we shouldn't be critical of others. All right, for the final example, this one's a doozy, and these don't come around too long. The FERC projects don't come as fast as furious as private landowners and highway projects and stuff like that. Our final scenario is a proposal by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to authorize construction of a small hydro dam on the Santa Frietta River. The dam will be located between the wild and recreational designated river segments. The project would involve creating a reservoir with the backwater that would extend close to, but not within, the designated river segment. However, the proposed reservoir could have significant negative effects on passage, water temperature, and spawning habitat for the Santa Frietta steelhead, which was previously designated as an outstandingly remarkable value of the designated segments. We got to take care of our fish. Tell me now, is this proposal subject to Section 7? If so, why, and what standard would apply and why? Poll is open. Come up with those answers.
Give it about 3 more seconds here. All right. Do you want to explain the answer and then I'll share the results?
Okay, sure. If Section 7 applies, Factor 4 addresses Federal Energy Regulatory Commission projects. Factor 4 says that if a proposed FERC project is on or directly affecting a designated river or congressionally authorized study river, it would be prohibited. Can't have it in the designation, right? No dams in a designated section of river. Since the project isn't within a designated stream corridor, it's outside, upstream or downstream, both in this situation, and the potential impacts on covered value are not direct, that prohibition does not apply. However, the reservoir backed up by the dam could potentially have a negative impact on the Santa Frietta steelhead population, which migrates through the designated river segments. The correct Section 7 evaluation standard to apply is Standard 3. Invade the area or unreasonably diminish the scenic, recreational, fishery, and wildlife values. In this case, it's the fishery. The standard applies because the proposed project is above but not within a designated river segment and has the potential to unreasonably diminish the fishery values present at the time of designation, specifically the outstandingly remarkable value associated with the Santa Frietta steelhead population. How do we do on that one, Angie?
Looks like majority of people got that one.
Okay. Returning once again to our Section 7 framework, remember these key factors to consider when a project comes to you to determine whether a Section 7 applies, and if so, what standard applies. With that, I'll turn this over to my co-instructor, Jim.
Great, thanks, Dave. So hopefully folks have got a feel for the various different standards. For those that were a little confused on that last one about invade or diminish versus invade or unreasonably diminish, the difference between the two has to do with whether or not it was a study river. This was a designated river, so the unreasonably diminish standard applies. Diminish is reserved for congressional study rivers. So we're going to pivot a little bit here and look at the relationship between the Section 7 process and NEPA. And Angie, if you want to go to the next slide. So a Section 7 determination is prompted with the initiation of a proposed project. And projects may be proposed by the river administering agency or by another federal, state, or local government agency. A typical project might be a highway project proposed by a state or local government. The project might also be proposed by a private landowner requiring a federal permit, such as a Section 404 from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So that would be something like that bank stabilization project that we saw in Dave's example on the Santa Frietta River. Ideally, the review should be conducted by an interdisciplinary team comprised of a hydrologist and a specialist for each outstandingly remarkable value. So depending on the capacity of the agency, a lot of times there may not be an interdisciplinary team. It might just be a river manager, but in the ideal world, we'd have a team of specialists that would review these projects. And the ID team, the interdisciplinary team, can use NEPA information provided by the project proponent as the basis for its Section 7 evaluation. A wide range of partners can assist with project review and help with analysis of effects of river values. That said, it's the responsibility of the river administering agency to complete the evaluation based on the information gathered. The analysis is an objective review of the project effects on free flow, water quality, and ORVs. And even if a third-party contractor has a major role in preparing the evaluation, it's still the river administering agency's responsibility to make the determination. While a NEPA document is designed to disclose impacts, the Section 7 determination analyzes compliance with standards found in the Act. Section 7 determination doesn't require its own NEPA analysis, but can use information from the NEPA documentation. So just to be clear, the act of conducting a Section 7 determination is not a, does not require its own NEPA. In those cases where there's not a NEPA document, information about the affected environment is still needed and can be requested from the project proponent, ideally early in any consultation. The end result is a determination of whether the project meets the appropriate Section 7 standard. Section 7 determination provides the agency decision concerning whether the project can proceed without adverse consequences to the protected river corridor. So a project can be submitted for review through a variety of channels. Best practice is to build relationships with parties who are regularly working on new projects. These parties include personnel who work for the Army Corps of Engineers and state and federal highway agencies. For example, on the upper Deschutes Wild and Scenic River in Oregon, the Forest Service has a stewardship team comprised of representatives from state scenic waterways, the Department of State Lands, Deschutes County, and the Army Corps of Engineers to work with landowners on proposals for stream bank stabilization in advance of applications for permits from the Army Corps of Engineers, the state, or the county. You might also be in contact with personnel within your agency who may initiate projects within the protected river corridor. So maybe it's a campground or a new boat launch or repairs to an existing boat launch. It's important to note that projects of any size may be subject to Section 7 review, regardless of the type of environmental review being conducted by the federal assisting agency. Section 7 review requirements can apply to projects that fall under NEPA categorical exclusions. By building relationships, you can increase understanding of Section 7 requirements and processes. You may also be able to consult with the proponent and agency personnel on design and siting issues before the project comes up for formal Section 7 review. It's often much easier to address potential impacts to river values early in the project design. One of the most common triggers for Section 7 determinations is U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permit applications for dredge and fill activities under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbor Act of 1899 also requires that regulated activities conducted below ordinary high water for navigable waters of the United States be authorized by the Army Corps of Engineers. An application for a Department of Army permit will serve as an application for both Section 404 and Section 10 permits. Typical projects requiring Corps permits include bank stabilization, bridge construction, boat ramps, and docks. Highway projects frequently trigger the need for Section 404 permits including highway widening, replacement, and maintenance of bridges and emergency repairs. The Army Corps process requires a written determination from the River Administering Agency for such projects. The scope of the Army Corps jurisdiction pursuant to these regulatory authorities is defined in the Code of Federal Regulations at 33 CFR 328 and 329. The Army Corps uses a process called nationwide permits to authorize the multitude of smaller projects that fall below certain thresholds or meet other criteria. While an individual permit is not needed for these projects, the proponent must notify the Army Corps that they are operating under a nationwide permit. If the Corps approves the use of a nationwide permit for the proposed activity, then a list of terms and conditions automatically applies to protect the river environment. Nationwide permits do not authorize an activity on a wild and scenic river without a written determination from the River Administering Agency that the activity will not adversely affect the designated river or study corridor. This pre-construction notice is made by a proponent to the Army Corps for any project within a wild and scenic river corridor. The Corps is required to notify and coordinate with the appropriate river administering agency about any proposed projects that fall under a nationwide permit. And I should point out that in some parts of the country, the Army Corps has suspended nationwide permits in lieu of regional or statewide general permits, which apply to similar qualifying activities. So now that we've talked about triggers for section analysis, section 7 analysis, let's look at mechanics of section 7 evaluation and determination. For example, what is the process for doing a section 7 determination? What does a section 7 determination include? Who completes the section 7 determination? And who has the authority to sign a section 7 determination? Overall, the section 7 analysis serves as a go or no-go checkpoint for whether a water resources project may be approved. Section 7 analysis is formally documented in the section 7 evaluation and resulting section 7 determination. If a project is found to violate the relevant evaluation standard, it is prohibited unless Congress intervenes. Section 7 evaluation must answer this question: does the project meet the applicable standard for this stream segment? For example, would the project have a direct and adverse effect to water quality on the designated stream segment? It is the responsibility of the river administering agency to make the section 7 determination. The agency can rely on the interdisciplinary team, contractors, and partners to gather the information, complete the analysis, and create the documentation. However, the final determination is solely in the hands of the responsible official delegated to make the determination for their agency. The project proponent can assist with providing information, technical analysis, and funding for evaluation, but the final determination and decision is made by the river administrator. And due to the importance of protecting wild and scenic rivers and congressionally authorized study areas, Section 7 determinations are high-level agency decisions. In some cases, signatory authority has been delegated to lower levels of the agency, such as the park superintendent or river manager. For the Forest Service, the regional forester makes a determination. For the Park Service, it's the regional director. For BLM, it's a state director. And for Fish and Wildlife, the regional refuge manager makes the determination. Let's take a closer look at the contents of the Section 7 evaluation and determination. There are 5 basic components, regardless of the evaluative standard used. First, it provides a description of the river and its values, which vary depending on the standard applied. Second, it lists and examines the management direction that applies to the Wild and Scenic River and to the project. Third, it describes the proposed project and its activities. It identifies all aspects of the Water Resources Project or FERC hydropower project to be analyzed. It provides an analysis of the impacts on the river values appropriate to the evaluative standard and describes the analysis results. And finally, it provides a determination of effect based on the analysis. A simple Section 7 determination might be just a few pages, whereas determinations for more complex or highly controversial projects may be much longer and involve more documentation in anticipation of potential litigation. A Section 7 determination is adequate when it includes all the relevant facts, makes a reasoned and thoughtful analysis, and reaches a well-supported conclusion. The ultimate outcome of a Section 7 determination is that any approved water resources project will ensure that the Wild and Scenic River is protected and its river values are preserved into the future. The Interagency Wild and Scenic Rivers Coordinating Council has an excellent technical paper on Section 7 that provides guidance for evaluation procedures and creating a determination. The federal land management agencies also have agency-specific guidance and examples. The Forest Service regulations found at 36 CFR 297 have been held by at least one federal court as governing the implementation of Section 7 requirements for all river administering agencies. Other examples include the BLM 6400 manual, which provides examples of Section 7 determinations. National Park Service Reference Manual 46, which includes National Park Service requirements, and Forest Service Manual 2354.7, which describes Forest Service procedures for evaluation of water resources projects. So Section 7 determinations can be complex, and you should not hesitate to ask for help from colleagues or from your agency's Wild and Scenic Rivers coordinator. And with that, we will do a poll to test your knowledge.
All right, I'm getting it up here, and
So the question before you is, what is the minimum information needed from a proponent to begin a Section 7 evaluation? Is it the location of the project relative to the protected river? Whether or not there's a federal nexus? A need to describe the project, including its location in relation to ordinary high water? The magnitude, extent, and duration of the project, or all of the above?
we'll give it about 3 more seconds here. And here we go.
All right, rock on, 100%. And with that, should we take a break and just check in and see if there's any questions before we move on to the next section?
Yeah, that's a great idea. So if you do have any questions, again, you can type them into the questions box on your GoToWebinar control panel. So far, the only question that I've seen come in was referencing one of the slides where it had WRP written, and someone asked, what does WRP stand for? And that's an abbreviation for Water Resources Projects. And then I also saw a question come in asking about getting the slides sent. So yes, when I send out the recording of this webinar, I'm also going to include a PDF version of the slides. You can get to the links that way. And then also when this is posted on the River Training channel, in the description of the video, you can also find links to the slides as well as the handouts with the video there. And at this time, I don't see any other questions coming in. But again, if you do have a question that comes up, feel free to put it in that questions tab and we'll stop and take another break in a little bit and we can address it.
All right, well, I'm going to hand it back to Dave for the next group of slides.
All righty. Hopefully I'm up again. Am I up there?
Yep. That
Okay.
looks great.
All right, moving on to section 7 evaluations. Here we go. Another reminder of the 4 evaluative standards, because I haven't told you them enough today. You have to choose from the standard that you will use to evaluate a proposed water resources project depends on the type of federally assisted water resources project, hydro or other, and the location of the project within the river corridor or upstream, downstream, or on a tributary to the designated or congressionally authorized study river. On or directly affecting, direct or adverse effect, invade the area or unreasonably diminish, and finally invade the area or diminish. All section 7 evaluations should include some basic components. First, description of the river. You should include a profile description of the wild and scenic river. Include the basic facts about the river, including the segments affected, their length, their classification, and their ORVs. Should be in your CRMP. Describe the landscape character of the river and any other relevant facts about the river values and resources that might be affected by the proposed project. Obviously, the better your CRMP is written, the better this comes out. While managing the agency's jurisdiction over Section 7 determinations doesn't depend on land ownership. Land ownership is an important part of the affected river environment. Land ownership can have important implication on what's required under federal agency policy and practice for complementary regulations implemented by other units of government and for public involvement and outreach. For the Section 7 evaluation and to ensure the project fits within current management direction, itemize all relevant management guidance. Relevant guidance might include goals, standards, and guidelines from the Comprehensive River Management Plans, the CRMP. Relevant guidance might also be found in forest plans, resource management plans, park plans, refuge plans, you name it. Scour your office. Your CRMP is more specific on things. Look for specific, tangible things that you've written that have to do with qualities that you're looking for related to the area that this specific project is in. You're not going to find a lot from your CRMP on upstream projects or downstream projects, so you do have to look for other things. Next, describe the proposed project activity. Use enough detail to identify the project proponent, the purpose and need for the project, the geographic location, and the magnitude and extent of the activities. You should also describe the timing and duration of the project and its relationship to past and future management actions. Finally, describe any additional facts that will help with the analysis and evaluation, such as inventories and studies performed by the applicant in preparation for the project. Much of the information in the evaluation may come from the NEPA analysis for federal projects, or from the information from the Section 7 evaluation may inform the NEPA analysis. Some of the stuff you only have to cover once in the NEPA analysis or the Section 7, but they need to tie to each other. Information may also come from project submittals to state and local governments. It is the project proponent's responsibility to get the Section 7 agency the needed information. We don't necessarily provide that when they come in with nothing. If there's no NEPA document, or if it's the proponent does not provide the detailed site-specific information about affected resources, or the proponent does not adequately describe the project design and the construction methods, then the determination will need to be delayed until the information is provided. You know, field work may be required to assemble the data, and you may not have the people to do that. The key is engage early with the project proponent and the federal assisting agency. Early engagement can ensure the availability of all information needed to effectively evaluate the effects on the project and on river values, and to identify potential risk factors. Early consultation and participation on project scoping can lead to a project that is designed to satisfy wild and scenic standards. You know, the minute you hear somebody's going to do something, start meeting with them. And, you know, what we do on my forest is we go out and meet with them. I take my guy from the irrigation district because he's a trusted face and he's really smart, and he can say things that I can't as a federal guy. And, you know, he can suggest some of our local consultants that are really good and know our rules and how to deal with wild and scenic stuff. And they can talk down, you know, my private landowners from using old Luke down the street, who has a big excavator and a bunch of broken parking lots. He can dump down the riverbank that my landowner was originally thinking about doing. So the sooner you can start talking about people before they start putting out cash into something that is not going to be wild and scenic compliant, the better off you're going to be. You know, Section 7 establishes the direct and adverse effect standards for water resource projects that are below the ordinary high water mark of a designated wild and scenic river. Besides being the basic information on the current and baseline condition of the values for which a river was designated or is being studied, we know those are free flow, water quality, and its ORVs. This standard, besides being the most common, often requires the most in-depth analysis. The Section 7 evaluation for direct and adverse standard is a narrative description of the effects of the project activities on a variety of conditions on the ground, both above and below the ordinary high water mark. The evaluation should cover effects to within channel conditions, riparian and floodplain conditions, and upland conditions. The determination should also evaluate how the proposed project will alter hydraulic and biological processes. This is where you need your ologists, your specialists in your building. And you need to get some of their time. You know, the minute you know something's happened, you need to start working some time into their budgeted hours to get their input on these projects. You can't just wing it. The Section 7 determination should also estimate the size, scale, and scope of the potential offsite changes that will occur. It should estimate the time scale over which these changes occur and the consequences of these actions and effects. It should compare the project effects to the management goals, the ORV's classification, and any other relevant direction for consistency in protecting river values. The evaluation should specifically identify the potential impacts on each river-related value, including ORVs, water quality, and free-flowing condition. Since the Act requires protection of these specific values through Section 7 process, any litigation surrounding the Section 7 determination will likely be centered on how thoroughly the impacts to these values are documented. The Wild and Scenic Rivers Act establishes a different standard for projects that are upstream, downstream, or on a tributary to a designated river, including hydropower projects. This standard is specific to scenic, recreational, fish, and wildlife values, and includes the component of management discretion. The plain meaning of invade is to encroach or intrude upon. A common example is a dam proposed downstream of a designated segment. The evaluation of the project would include information about the reservoir levels to determine if it would invade the designated river. I mean, the backflow from that dam backing up into having dead water in your flowing river. Evaluation of the standard would also require determining the magnitude, extent, and duration of a proposed water resources project effects on scenery, recreation, fish, and wildlife values at the time of designation. Does the proposed project cause diminution of the scenic, recreational, and fish and wildlife values of the designated river as present at the date of designation? If there is diminution of it, is it unreasonable? This would suggest that an evaluation of the magnitude of loss. Factors to be considered include whether the value contributed to the designation of the river, i.e. the outstandingly remarkable, and the current conditions and trends of the resource. If the diminution is determined unreasonable, measures may be recommended to reduce the adverse effects to within acceptable rivers. The final standard we'll discuss is a standard that applies only to water resources projects upstream, downstream, or on a tributary to congressionally authorized or 2A study rivers. During the period of study designated by Congress, as has been noted earlier, this standard does not include the term unreasonable. The intent of the standard is to protect the study rivers' eligibility from inclusion in the wild and scenic river system during the period of study. As within the unreasonable diminishment standard, the standard is applied to the condition of those specific values at the time of study designation. The evaluation of a standard is very similar to the previous standard. The purpose of this evaluation is to determine whether the water resources project would cause any diminishment of those specific values that would cause the river to be rendered ineligible for inclusion in the system or to change its possible classification. On to a poll. Why is it so important to describe the upland conditions in Section 7 in a Section 7 evaluation? To identify the location of the ordinary high water, to clearly define the free-flowing condition, to understand any upland or offsite effects of a water resources project, or to understand where the roads are.
We'll give it about 3 more seconds here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close and share. Looks like 78%, majority of you all got it.
You guys are getting smarter by the minute. All righty. To understand any upland and offsite effects of a water resources project. They're just not all underwater. All right. Going on from here is going to be Jim McCartney's. Back to you in the studio, Jim.
Thanks, Dave. So yeah, sometimes we forget that what's happening above ordinary high water matters too on these projects. And with Section 7, if any portion of the project is below ordinary high water, that provides jurisdiction for the river administrating agency, but then we look at the full project. So great to see that most folks got that answer correct. So We're going to talk now about the Section 7 determination itself, and if Angie, you want to go ahead and click one more time? We saw this slide previously, identifying the various, for each of the agencies, who's responsible for making the determination, and we learned that each agency has their own procedure for completing the final determination. That said, the Interagency Council recommends that the final determination includes some consistent content and approach. So in the final determination, the responsible official articulates their rationale for whether the proposed activity may or may not proceed. The determination makes a clear statement about the impacts on each river value, including the appropriate evaluation standard. And the statement should address direct, indirect, and cumulative impacts to river values. Again, as Dave laid out, the most frequently used standards are direct and adverse effect. That's for projects that are within the river corridor. Invade or unreasonably diminish for upstream and downstream projects or projects on tributaries, and invade or diminish for upstream, downstream, or tributary projects in the case of a congressional study river. So an example of a clearly stated Section 7 determination might be something like the following. Pursuant to Section 7A of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, the National Park Service has determined on behalf of the Secretary of the Interior that this project will not have a direct and adverse effect on the free-flowing character, water quality, scenic, and wildlife values of the Santa Frietta Wild and Scenic River. The determination should clearly indicate if the project may or may not move forward, and should contain a signature line for the approving official with title and date. So now we'll look at some of the outcomes that can result from Section 7 evaluation and determination. And once the Section 7 evaluation is complete, there are 3 possible outcomes of the review by the river administering agency. The first situation is when the project has been determined to have an adverse effect, regardless of the evaluation standard applied. This situation is a red light. The project may not go forward with federal assistance as proposed. The second situation is when the river administering agency has made a preliminary adverse effect determination, in which the agency may have suggested ways that an adverse determination can be avoided. This is more of a yellow light situation. If avoidance measures are adopted, a revised project would be proposed, and a second final Section 7 determination would be completed based on the merits of the revisions submitted by the proponent. The final situation is a green light. The Section 7 determination concluded that the project would not have an adverse effect. The project can go forward with federal assistance as proposed. While these are the 3 possible outcomes of an evaluation, it's important to note that a determination must be yes or no. The determination may not weigh or balance one value over another in order to find a compromise that would allow the project to proceed. An applicant's efforts to avoid, minimize, or mitigate impacts are often a critical part of the Section 7 process. However, Section 7 does not allow mitigation to be applied in the same manner as under other environmental protection laws. For example, Section 4F of the Department of Transportation Act of 1966 allows a project to go forward if there's, quote, no feasible and prudent alternative. Another example is Section 404 of the Clean Water Act, which provides compensation of, quote, unavoidable wetland losses. Implicit in these examples is that Congress empowered the administering agencies of these laws to decide whether the greater public good is served by going ahead with a project despite its impacts. In contrast, Congress did not give the river administering agencies this power under the Wild and Scenic Act. Instead, Congress specified that no federal agency could assist in constructing a water resources project that is determined to have a direct and adverse effect on wild and scenic values or to violate other applicable standards. Compensatory and off-site mitigation measures are not acceptable solutions under Section 7. The Act does not provide for balancing of impacts between various river values, such as improving water quality to compensate for impacts to free flow or ORVs. Minimizing to make impacts smaller, but still violating the standard is insufficient. However, minimizing impacts below the evaluation threshold is permissible. So what happens if a proposed project doesn't meet the standard and the assisting agency decides to recommend authorization anyway? The Act has a solution for this. Section 7 lays out a process for a federal agency to move forward with either a hydropower or a water resources project that would adversely affect river values. The process allows Congress to decide whether the project can move forward. If the assisting agency decides to proceed with the project, it must notify the Secretary of the Interior or Agriculture at least 60 days before submitting a written request to Congress to authorize or appropriate funds for the project, including an explanation of how it conflicts with the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. Alternatively, Congress can pass a law to move a project forward on its own. That's what happened in the case of the bridge shown here. The National Park Service determined that the bridge would have an adverse effect on the scenic and recreational values of the St. Croix Wild and Scenic River. Congress intervened to allow the bridge project to be constructed. Congressional intervention has rarely happened since the act was signed into law. There have only been 2 examples that have occurred as of 2021. So we'll stop for a moment and go to a quick poll. So if an adverse effect determination, I'm sorry, if, I can't see the question here. If an adverse effect determination under Section 7 is made by the river administering agency, there are 3 choices. The project cannot go forward. Project can go forward with added on mitigation measures, or the project can go forward if there's no reasonable and prudent alternative.
All right, looks like most people have voted, so we'll go ahead and close the poll.
Correct. For 88% of you, the project cannot go forward. So most Section 7 consultations result in a project that will protect and enhance river values. And by working with project proponents, you can anticipate a good outcome satisfactory to all stakeholders. So we've got a couple slides coming up that show examples of projects that were designed to protect and enhance river values. And we'll start with a project on the Trinity River in California. In the case of the Trinity River, fisheries is the outstandingly remarkable value. As you can see in the 2009 photo on the left, the river channel had become deeply entrenched, resulting in very little shallow water and side channel habitat for spawning and rearing. And project stakeholders desired to implement a restoration project to improve the habitat. As you should know by now, this required Section 7 consultation. And in the right-hand photo from 2011, you can see the results of the project. The restored river included more meanders, gravel bars, and side channels. So what we see is that through Section 7 consultation, the project was designed in a manner that avoided impact to the river's free-flowing condition, water quality, and it also improved the fisheries ORV. Let's look at another example from the Westfield River in Massachusetts. This is a bridge replacement project that was implemented on the Westfield. The old bridge shown in the photo on the left impacted free-flowing condition because it had structural supports below the ordinary high water mark. The replacement bridge was designed to avoid placement of permanent structures below ordinary high water, and this helped to protect and enhance the recreational and fish and wildlife ORVs for this river. So again, by engaging during the design process for Section 7 projects, it's possible to ensure that the full range of river-related values are addressed. In this case, such as recreational boating and the impacts on in-stream and riparian habitats. Take a look at one more project. Again, this is another project on the Westfield River in Massachusetts. This happened to be a culvert replacement project. The old culvert on the left impacted the free-flowing condition because of the structural supports, the exposed concrete bottom in the channel below the ordinary high water mark. As you can see, the culvert significantly affected the shape of the channel downstream. It impeded the natural transport of watershed products such as wood and sediment, and it also impeded fish passage. The open bottom replacement structure shown in the photo on the right was designed to avoid placement of permanent structures below the ordinary high water mark. And the project also improved fish passage by providing a natural stream bed through the structure and helped to protect and enhance the recreational and fish and wildlife ORVs for this river. So in summary, we've learned how to apply the appropriate evaluative standards, how to integrate Section 7 into NEPA analysis or environmental permitting, and how to use the contents of NEPA documents for the Section 7 determination. We've looked at the key steps to complete a Section 7 evaluation, and we've gone over what information to include in a written Section 7 determination. And with that, I think we'll open it up for any questions, comments, or discussion.
Thanks, Jim. So,
Jim, we did have a question from Nick. Just saying, can you go into more detail on how the NEPA CEQ regulations play out in the Section 7?
Yeah, sure. I'm not a NEPA expert. I'm not sure that either Dave or I would identify ourselves as such. I think there's a few important things to think about with respect to NEPA and Section 7. First and foremost, as was mentioned earlier, the Section 7 process itself does not trigger a NEPA action. So it's the activity or the federal assistance that that may trigger NEPA, not the analysis and the Section 7 determination by the river administering agency. So that's point one to take home. Point two is that the information that's gathered as part of the NEPA process can be used for the Section 7 evaluation, analysis, and determination. And I'll come back to that in a second, but it can be really helpful information. Dave kind of went through the information that gets gathered for the Section 7 evaluation. It's we need good information about the project in order to make a determination as to whether or not there's going to be a direct and adverse effect, or whether there might be an unreasonable diminishment or a diminishment in the case of one of the other standards. So we need good information about the impact on the riverine environment, and the Section 7, or I'm sorry, the NEPA documentation may be able to provide that. I think one of the other important things to think about is the synchronization or the timing. For the river administering agency, typically we're looking to have the NEPA documentation finalized before we make our Section 7 determination. And part of the reason we're looking to do that is often we're relying on that same body of information that the federal agency that's performing NEPA is relying on to make its decision and to finalize its EIS, EA, and its record of decision. It's not uncommon that the agency that's required to comply with NEPA is looking to have the Section 7 determination complete before they finalize their record of decision. So there's there can be some tension in that realm. So I think I'll leave it there. Dave, do you have anything to add on that point?
Not really, Jim. Just that, yeah, it's projects are either on our own federal lands where we're doing the NEPA, and we only need to cover things once, whether it's in the Section 7 or the NEPA document itself. We don't have to cover it twice. They can play off each other pretty well. Or else it's another agency who's doing their own NEPA, and a lot of times they'll try and bring us both the NEPA document and their own version of a Section 7, and we don't consider it a Section 7 unless we've actually done the work on it and done the research. We don't always accept what they turn into us as the God's honest truth. We do have to take things in and analyze them as ourselves as the administering agency. Just because they say it's there or it happened that way doesn't mean that that's the honest data. Or they'll say it never is going to happen that way, or this will, that's the way it is. But we do need a lot of data, and even the private landowners up on, responsible for getting us the data that we need for our Section 7s. But there's a lot that we do require for a Section 7, and it's nice when people do bring in a lot of the work done for us, but it is our final duty to put that all together. And But a lot of the NEPA that I do is for the Forest Service, and when it's our projects, when it's our boat ramps, when it's our activities, when it's our when it's our projects. That's mostly what I see. The second most is highway projects or roads projects, and that's usually when in federal highways or State Department of Transportation is providing their own NEPA.
So hopefully that answers your question, Nick. I guess the other point that I should have made is that not every Section 7 determination has an associated NEPA action.
I also saw, oh, Nick said, yes, this was helpful. Thank you. And then I also saw a question come in from Tabitha asking, saying, I'm curious about wild and scenic river designations post NEPA in particular. Have you seen supplemental analyses in these cases where water resource projects were analyzed prior to designations?
So prior to designation, during a congressional study, which typically takes about 3 years, Section 7 applies during that study period, and potentially there could be associated NEPA actions during that time period as well. So, so if I'm understanding the question correctly, both NEPA and Section 7 can apply prior to designation, specifically for congressional study rivers, or in the case of a 2A2 river that Dave mentioned, those are applications to the Secretary of the Interior for designation. There's a 1-year period during which Section 7 might apply. It's a pretty unique situation for the 2A2.
Yeah, I definitely have seen designation happen after we've done NEPA on something for what was formerly an undesignated river, and those are new conditions that we have to analyze, and it does change things. We've also lost a lot of, we've done projects in many places where we haven't checked the eligibility of streams, and we've done the NEPA, but we haven't checked and seen if a stream is eligible or suitable, and we've gone ahead and done a project, and we've knocked out what could have been a future wild and scenic stream. We've knocked it out of competition there by allowing a project to happen to it, where we've taken out of the case of potentially like being a wild and designated wild classification, and put a road and a bridge across it, or a road up alongside of it. So we definitely need to pay attention to eligibles and suitables when we're doing projects and when we're doing our NEPA, that if there is something else going on with the stream other than just doing a project, get out the lists of eligible and suitables and see what's up, because stuff does change. And you can't just say, just because we did the NEPA before it was designated and now we're ready to do the project, all bets are off because you signed the project off on before it was designated. It happens.
Sounds like Dave may have answered the question better than I did. As I'm hearing his answer, I'm understanding maybe what I missed in the question, but if we didn't get it, Tabitha, please follow up.
And then I also see a question from Amy asking, what recourse is there if one federal agency indicates that Section 7 is not applicable, but the federal administering agency believes Section 7 is applicable or does apply?
It's a really great question. I think at this point in time, we have not come to loggerheads on that particular point, with the possible exception of FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, with respect to mitigation and enhancement projects. For a FERC licensed hydropower project. To the best of my knowledge, this has not been tested in court. If the river administering agency believes that we have jurisdiction, I think we will assert that, and we have. And I think to this point we have prevailed, and I'm unaware of any court cases that have come up with respect to this question, but in all likelihood, that's in the offing at some point in time.
It can also be sometimes it can be difficult with your Army Corps. They may want to just permit things and sort of do things in arrears. Now that the project's done, let's sort of try and make it legal. And the right thing to do is sometimes is to have everything that's been done taken back out, and that's a prerogative of the administering agency going, no, we're not going to try and fudge this into something that is a compliant project. We need to have whoever did this remove it and put things back the way they were. We're not going to take the easy way out of this just because it's the easy way out of it and it's less work for all of us. And that does come up.
I think this speaks to the importance of building relationships with the parties that are likely to be the federal assisting agencies like the Army Corps, or likely project proponents like state DOTs, so that there's an opportunity to educate them about the presence of a wild and scenic river in their backyard, educate them about the process for how the river administering agency generally conducts review and evaluation of proposed projects, and arguably most importantly, what the preferred method is of all parties concerned for consultation on those projects. So we flagged a couple times during the course of the presentation the importance of early consultation, and I think that really is key to success and the happiness of all parties. There's no project proponent that is happy when they submit their project and only to find out that it's a wild and scenic river, and that the Forest Service or the Park Service or BLM has jurisdiction, and there's going to be a delay in the project and additional cost. Nobody's happy in those scenarios.
Jim, this is Risa. Amy's talking about the Klamath Dam. So how often is it that there are multiple river administering agencies with jurisdiction in one location?
Also a really good question. It's the exception rather than the rule, but there are more than a handful of scenarios around the country where upstream portions of a river are managed by one of the river administering agencies and downstream by another. In some cases, it's left bank, right bank. In other cases, we have states involved. So in the case of the Klamath, we've got 2 states. We've got 3 federal, maybe there's 4 federal agencies, at least 3 federal agencies, BLM, Forest Service, and Park Service are all engaged. So it's a complex scenario. I'm imagining, Amy, you're talking about the dam removals and perhaps the recent decision by FERC, which I have yet to read, that is questioning the authority of the river administering agencies. So to be sorted.
And these are all great questions, and but I do want to be cognizant of the time, and we've only got a couple minutes left. So just want to remind folks that the next webinar in this Wild and Scenic webinar series is going to be on May 18th at the same time, 3rd Wednesday of the month, and we're going to be looking at ORVs, or outstandingly remarkable values. I'll put a link here in a second into the chat for where you can go to register. And then I also wanted to share that registration is open for the National Wilderness Skills Institute, and RMS has been helping out amongst a bunch of agencies and partners to help put together this Skills Institute, and there is going to be a Wild and Scenic Rivers track. You can register at wildernessskillsinstitute.org/NWSI, and it's virtual from May 24th to the 26th. It's free and open to agencies and partners and people who want to learn more about wilderness and wild and scenic rivers. So I highly encourage you to go check that out. We've got some great sessions lined up. And I haven't seen any other questions come in the chat, but again, I just want to say thanks to today's presenters, Jim and Dave, and that you can also, as a reminder, find their contact information in one of the handouts, and the handouts will also be posted along with the recordings. So stay tuned for those, and feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. And we hope to see you next month.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.